Alright guys, it is quilt week. Whoop whoop. I love quilting. I am finally going to show you how to quilt with a domestic sewing machine.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I used to be an operating room nurse till I found out that I was pregnant. So I decided to trade in all of my scraps so I could be with my family. Come hang out with me as I remodel my home, quilt, restore furniture, and find thrifted goods for my home. Please subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thanks! Alright, so let's get into it. So I made this quilt. The top is pieced. The center is fusible batting. I love the heirloom fusible batting. It's my favorite. You can iron all three pieces together for basting. I also added safety pins, and how I do that, just like how you see in that video, I pin and I roll, and that way everything stays nice and flat, which is the key with this quilt. You're not on a long arm. It's not stretched out. Not every single piece is stretched out, so you want to make sure that you don't bunch it up on the back. You can see my pattern. I chose a gold thread, and I did kind of like a filigree pattern, and then that's the presser foot I used. I liked the Free Motion Quilting presser foot from Amazon. It's not very expensive and it's great. And then yeah, I'm just kind of showing you how big the block is. I did a log cabin block. So in order to get this on a machine with a small throat, it is kind of tricky. You have to do a lot of rolling, and so that's what I did. I decided to start with one half of my quilt and then quilt the other half. So so I'm rolling half and then folding the other half that I'm not going to be rolling. I'm folding that half that I'm not going to be quilting on because you do not want gravity fighting against you pulling that quilt down. So you'll watch me constantly adjust so that that other half of the quilt isn't hanging off the table. Okay, so my house was disgusting, you can probably tell, but it's because we moved from Arizona to Kentucky. So I was trying to finish that quilt before we moved, but it didn't happen. Let me give that a go. My settings are all the same as they were before. My stitch pattern is still 2.5, and the area where my needle is set is in the center of my presser foot. And feed dogs are off, tension's at 4. Okay, so let's get into it. Some actual tips. So in order to start the process, you have to know how to start your thread. So what this part is going to be showing you, and excuse my very shaky footage, I'm trying to record, keep everything in frame while I'm also sewing, so it was a little tricky. Okay, so the first thing I did is I popped that needle down, and now you'll see me pulling that thread, and my goal here is to pull, and you see that little loop right there? That's the bobbin thread, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get both threads up to the top of your quilt so that you have a nice pretty back and you don't have strings on the back. Okay, both threads, perfect, beautiful. And then now do a couple of stitches, and then you can eventually, cut it. I don't know what you can't tell, but yeah, so I'm doing a couple stitches right now, and then I'm sewing a little bit just to make sure that those are knotted and really good. And then, I'll just go ahead and give them a cut. My video recording is so bad. There you go, cut. Okay, and now you're off to the horse races. You can start sewing. So this is the actual real time of what it's like like the speed wise, like what it looks like when you're actually quilting, it takes a really, really long time. I think I actually timed it out, and one section of the log cabin block, probably, I think it was about a minute and a half just for one strip. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus a center. So it took a while.
Okay, so the gist of, oh, Lumi. This is Lumi. She's my toy poodle. Say hi. Say hi. Hi. She's very angry. Anyways, so the gist of my quilt is pretty much done. So all I have to do are my 3 borders. Grandpa's not going to want this if you're rubbing your nasty face on it. Okay, go. All right, so for this I'm going to be using just a regular color pencil that's washable. Draw out my design so I can have the grand picture I can see. I swear. Lumi, go! Dogs and kids never get a break. So we'll draw out the design, that way I can see, and then I have kind of a template to follow. And I'm just gonna freehand it, that way it still has movement, it doesn't feel stiff, and yeah. So I'm gonna start with my corners, figure out what I wanna do on my corners, and then work my way into the center of the border.
So I didn't really explain what kind of pencil it is that I used. Oh, and there's a Gideon. Hi, Gideon. He's my sweet Burmese mountain dog. He's such a cuddle bug. Anywhere there is a baby or there's me, there's a Gideon. So back to the pencil. I just use Prismacolor. They're super, how do I explain it? They're not oily, but they're very soft. And they actually stick onto fabric really well, quite better than a lot of the quilting pencils, like the silver quilting pencils that you can get. I actually have better luck with those.
Okay, so I'm starting the border. Yay! I'm so excited. This can either like make or break my quilt, I feel like. So I'm not really gonna be talking very much in it. So I'm going to start with the corner. I drew out with just a basic colored pencil. I don't think you guys can see that from my angle, but I just use a contrasting color to draw out my pattern, and hopefully I don't rub it off as I'm pushing. Yeah.
Okay, so you can see how I picked up that fabric, so I made sure that I did not have any fabric hanging off that table. When you have fabric hanging off that table, it allows gravity to pull down on it, so while you're trying to push forward, that fabric will actually be pulling against you. And then also another thing is I keep my hands parallel to my design, and see, constantly readjusting. So hands are parallel to my design. Whenever I feel like I'm not in full control, I stop and I readjust. And I think that's like the biggest key, is to not try to make these big swooping movements like you were if you were on a long arm free motion quilting, but to be patient and know that you only have like 5 or 6 inches to work with at a time.
Start building that spine and get those spirals going, and I'm really trying to be careful to stay on that spine, that way it looks nice and sharp. It's really hard to see what I'm doing, so I'm going to be doing a lot of stopping and starting as I continue quilting, because I don't want to jump off that spine. I really want it to be crisp and clean. So this is why I like having that see-through presser foot. It really helps me out. That way I can see where I'm going. So I'm going to start one half and then I'll go back on the other.
So that technique that I was talking about doing, I used that first technique on my smaller blocks because I do talk about muscle memory. That really does well on a smaller block. That way you still remember how it flows, so your brain still knows where to go. But when you make a huge 80-inch line, your brain isn't remembering which way it's going to be moving next. So I'll be talking about that shortly. Oh, okay, and this is another great example of keeping your hands parallel. Yikes, look how close that needle is to my fingers. Oh, it's so scary sometimes, but yeah, it's worth it in the end. I did not hurt my fingers, so we're all good. But yes, keeping hands parallel. Some people like to use quilting gloves. They look like gardener gloves with kind of like a non-skid plastic grips on the hands and the fingers. I used that in the beginning and they were fine, but they're just a little, I don't know. They're not expensive. I just didn't feel like I needed them. So I didn't use them for the rest of the quilt. But yeah, so I'm staying on that spine and I'm going up the polyp and then down. But I eventually find out that it's not really the best method to use when you're doing a huge design like this one.
So, I don't know, I'm gonna pause right here to let you guys know. So what I found on my way up trying to rebuild, I talked about building up my spine. Build up your spine, build up your spine. But what I'm finding is when I'm constantly tracking up that spine that I just sewed like 4 or 5 minutes ago, my brain still doesn't have that muscle memory of that previous action. So I'm finding myself trying to look to see where that line is going. So if I actually go up my spine here, you know, here's my spine of my thread. If I go up my spine, and then I trace back that line I just drew and then come up that other polyp and then polyp. And I'll see if I can create an animation to kind of explain that more. I'm moving my fabric at a horizontal fashion and it makes it so that I can actually see it. And it allows me to still have that, you know, muscle memory that is just so needed in free motion quilting, because you know my brain can't remember a line that I just drew, you know, sewed 5 minutes ago, but it can remember the flow that it just pushed 3 seconds ago. So that's kind of what I'm finding out, that it's a lot neater and cleaner if I don't, you know, make that spine too hard, but come down the spine, go up my polyp, go back to that tip of that polyp, and then up again, back, and then up again. It seems cleaner to me. So that's what I'm gonna keep doing.
So I also wanted to add in this border. So most of my whole quilt was those little filigree design. But you can also quilt different designs. There's lots of wonderful free motion quilting patterns. So yeah, you can do cursive handwriting because cursive handwriting really doesn't have to disconnect. You can just keep everything flowing and beautiful, and it can be organic because it's your handwriting and nobody has the same handwriting as you. And I don't know, I just feel like it just made something more of like a personal touch, and that's how I feel about my dad. So there we go. Hi everyone. Okay, so I'm editing the video and I'm realizing I've missed a very important part of free motion quilting on a domestic sewing machine. The big one being stitching. Stitching is hard on the free motion quilting on a domestic sewing machine. It is hard because when you have a long arm, as you push, your needle bounces down, up and down to accommodate your quickness. It doesn't work like that on your domestic sewing machine. If you know you're gonna push really, really hard with that fabric going up, then you better put your foot on the presser foot. Else you're gonna have really long stitches. And so what I mean by long stitches is if this is your fabric, going into your machine, and your needle's coming like this, and then you just randomly jump that fabric out, you're gonna have a really long stitch by the time that needle comes back down. So finding your comfortable spot, I absolutely recommend using a piece of scrap fabric and practicing getting your feeling of how it feels to move that fabric through your machine, because you don't think it, but your forearms are gonna be burning. They really will be. You can only work as long as your muscles allow you to. I remember my arms just killed me. You're fighting gravity, you're trying to push something, and you have a piece of surface area this big to work with. And they do make products to help you with that. I think it's called a sliding board. It's like a thin piece of plastic that can go over that helps you glide the fabric through. I'm kind of, I don't know, I really try not to buy too much craft stuff that I don't really need. Because to me, I think having a good technique and knowing how to use what you have always trumps buying something that you think is going to help you, but if you really don't know the basics, is it going to help? So I really didn't want to invest a ton of money into this free motion quilting experience because I didn't know if I was going to like it. But I love it. It's great. I'm going to keep doing it for sure. So yeah, I wanted to talk about how you push it. So get out some scrap fabric with some batting and another piece on the back and just feel it. See how it feels. And then my other thing I briefly mentioned was your feed dogs. You have to make sure your feed dogs are off. There's usually a little lever on the back that you can push, at least that's how it is on my sewing machine, and that takes those teeth that help push it through when you're normally sewing, it drops them down so that you're not fighting against that as well. And I don't think I missed anything else. If you guys have questions, leave them down below. I answer every single thing, every comment. I always write something back. I'm also on Instagram, Amelia Bakolas. Hit me up there. You have questions, just let me know.
Thanks.
So this is the final shot. It has great texture. I really love it. I think at the end of it, I ended up using 8 or 9 spools of cotton thread. And then that's a shot of the beginning of how I started sewing and what it actually ended up looking like after time and practice. So just keep it up and don't be afraid to try. And then there's a couple fun shots of the dogs, and I, these dogs have been right by my feet. I mean, Gideon's by my feet now as I'm doing this voiceover. They're just always with me, and they're always best buds when we do projects. It ended up being the size of a full size, so I'll see if I can find some measurements for you guys. But that's the back. I used the rest of my fat quarters, and I made a fun little decorative back. And then there's my sweet dad. It's so cute. And he's cuddling with it. I really hope he enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it. And then I gave it to him for Christmas. And while I was there at their house, I made a duvet for my grandmother's quilt that she made. Her fabric actually didn't hold up throughout the years, and so you would lay with it and your feet would go through it. So I made a duvet. So if you guys are interested in how I make duvets, let me know. I'll gladly do a duvet video. But yes, thank you for sticking with me during this time. I really appreciate it. Please give me a subscribe if you found value with this. And